Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jack Douglas with another armchair vacation in America. The Chippewa Indians called it Meskusing, or the Gathering of the Waters. Today, some people call it America's Dairyland, but no matter what name we give it, Wisconsin offers a countryside of rolling green hills, 8,000 lakes, and handsome modern cities. Its people proudly cherish the customs of their ancestors, whether they be Winnebago Indians or the Swiss who live in the village of New Glarus. This, ladies and gentlemen, is your armchair vacation and mine, away in Wisconsin. This strange-looking creature gave Wisconsin its nickname, the Badger State, and this badger resides at the Milwaukee Zoo, but his kinfolk may be found in forests such as this, in the northern part of the state. 50% of Wisconsin is natural woodland, making it ideal vacation country for anyone who loves the out-of-doors. But the woods and lakes are only part of the story of this beautiful state. In the city of Racine, we can marvel, for example, at the genius of Frank Lloyd Wright, who designed these buildings for one of Wisconsin's large manufacturing companies. Built in 1936, they were certainly far ahead of the times. The state capital is Madison, a beautiful small city with Lake Mendota on the north and Lake Monona to the south. Milwaukee, however, is Wisconsin's major city with a population of over 600,000 and widely known as a center of German-American culture in the United States. One of the most striking examples of modern architecture to be found here is the Milwaukee County War Memorial Center. Designed by the famous architect Eero Saarinen, this building of classic design stands as a tribute to those who gave their lives in World War II and the Korean War. Huge mosaic panels on the exterior of the Memorial Center depict the dates of the two wars in massive Roman numerals. Made by Edmund Lewandowski, the 5 panels weigh about 10,000 pounds and contain 1,440,000 pieces of glass and stone. As modern as the space age are the 3 glass domes of the Horticultural Conservatory in Milwaukee's Mitchell Park. They're called conoidal space frames, and each dome is 140 feet in diameter and 80 feet high. Inside, a spiderweb network of glass and aluminum tubing allows natural sunlight to nurture the hundreds of plants and blooming flowers. We're in the structure called the show house, where the summer plant display is the current attraction. Come September, these delicate pink and lavender asters will be removed to make way for an entirely different floral extravaganza in this, the most unusual house of flowers in America. Looking at these tall, reed-like grasses, you might think we've taken a detour to Cape Cod, but the place is Sheboygan, and the beach is on the breeze-swept shores of Lake Michigan. Waves to frolic in, and the warm sun above, it's a great place to bring the children. The beach, by the way, is at Terry Andrae State Park, an hour-and-a-half drive north of the city. Green Bay, like many other Wisconsin cities, stands on the edge of an important waterway. Located at the southern tip of a large bay that extends into Lake Michigan, it began its growth as a fur trading center in the late 1700s. About 12 miles south of the city, on Highway 57, there is a quiet park and a plaque that reads, Nicolet Memorial. The statue is of Jean Nicolet, a French explorer who stepped out of a birch canoe and into the pages of history. The year was 1634. Nicolet was met by a party of friendly Winnebago Indians, and Wisconsin's recorded history began on that day, only 14 years after the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. The pride and joy of Green Bay, as we know, is one of the toughest football teams in the nation. The Green Bay Packers are one of the few teams ever to win the National Football League championship 2 years in a row. Green Bay, with a population of only 80,000, is the smallest city in the United States to support a professional football team. And what's more, the team is owned by the citizens of this sports-minded community. Most of the taxpayers own stock in the football franchise, and every year, the 51,000-seat stadium is practically sold out to season ticket buyers. Near the town of Bailey's Harbor, this small chapel reminds us of the Scandinavian settlers who came here in large numbers during the early 1800s. But the best-known replica of a real Scandinavian village is located in an isolated valley 23 miles northwest of Madison. It's called, appropriately, Little Norway. Open from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. 7 days a week, this charming bit of the old world has a museum building that was built in Trondheim, Norway in 1885. Brightly colored dragons with fiery tongues adorn the roof corners. The ancient Norsemen believed they would ward off evil spirits. Our curiosity aroused, let's follow our guide inside for a better look at the life and customs of the Norway in America many years ago. The young lady is Miss Hetty Rosehart, and she's wearing a Hardanger costume that derives its name from a province in Norway. These Norwegian vest fronts come in many different colors and are made of hundreds of tiny beads. And if you enjoy sewing, hear this. Each bead is sewn on the material individually, and it's all done the old-fashioned way, by hand, of course. And here's a pair of wooden wedding spoons that were carved from one single piece of pine. Now, the bride and groom ate with these spoons at their wedding feast, looping the chain around their necks. And according to tradition, the first of the newlyweds to take a bite of the wedding cake with one of these spoons would rule the house. If you think you're a Houdini, you might try to solve the puzzle of this jewel box. It has 14 wooden locks. It's been at the museum for 30 years, and in all that time, no one has been able to make all of the 14 locks open so that the inside of the box could be seen. We couldn't open it, so no pictures. I'm truly sorry. This is an ale bowl, a quart and a half to quench a Viking's thirst. In ships such as this model, the men of Norway dared the raging seas, and their descendants emigrated hundreds of years later to this part of Wisconsin, bringing with them the traditions and customs of their forebears. An example is this quaint little house of logs sitting on carved wooden posts. It's called the Stabbur house and was used for the storage of dry food. The heavy supports have deep niches cut into them to prevent rodents from climbing up and gnawing a hole in the floor of the storehouse. The high steps leading up to the Stabbur house were built as a separate unit and were placed almost 2 feet away from the front door, again as a protection against field mice. In Norway, Europe, girls still herd cows, and when they're in the mountains tending the herds, they live in log houses similar to this. These cabins have roofs made of log supports with a double layer of birch bark and about 6 inches of sod on top of the bark. The storks are thought to bring good luck to anyone living in the house. This little gnome-like fellow is called a nisse by the Norwegians and supposedly looks after the farm while the owners are asleep at night. The sign says Alpine Café, and judging from the look of the buildings, we could be in Zurich or St. Moritz. But the fact is, we're just 24 miles south of Madison at the small town of New Glarus, Wisconsin. Most of the buildings are of Swiss design, even to the placement of large rocks on the roofs to cause a slow breakup of heavy snow in the winter. New Glarus was founded in 1845 by 108 Swiss colonists who emigrated from the canton or state of Glarus, Switzerland. Today, there's a population of about 1,500, And when they stage their annual Volksfest in celebration of the founding of the colony, everyone in town turns out to watch the parade. About a fifth of the population takes part in the festival. There's the mayor of New Glarus riding by, the Swiss cheese queen, goats from the 4-H Club and Holstein Friesian milk cows, and now a Swiss flag thrower and marchers carrying long Alpine horns. Next, the flags of the 22 Swiss cantons carried by girls wearing authentic 13th century costumes. Now let's listen as the Edelweiss Stars sing and dance to an old Swiss song called Lustigsi. In Greenbush, Wisconsin, we visit at the old Wade House. It was once a stagecoach inn, a welcome stopping place for passengers on the stage run between Sheboygan and Fond du Lac. The house was built by Sylvanus Wade in 1852, 8 years after he had settled in Greenbush, bringing his wife Betsy and their 9 children to live in a cabin built of logs. In 1950, the old inn was rescued from a state of dilapidation and completely restored. Typical of the authentic furniture to be found inside the inn is this hut chair that can be used either as a seat or a table. And how would you like this Royal Doulton bowl and pitcher in your kitchen cupboard? Over 100 years old, they're almost priceless in value. In 1852, one of the conveniences for the lady of the house was the spring-fed well right smack in the kitchen. Well, today, the same pure water is brought up in the good old-fashioned way with a wooden bucket. The Wade House has one of the finest collections of English spatterware china in the entire country. No less beautiful is this handsomely canopied old 4-poster bed made of a wood called tiger maple. In the tavern section, we can see the original registration desk, and during the Civil War, it was used as a swearing-in place for men from Greenbush who were joining the forces of the northern states. Remember it and see it, the old Wade House at Greenbush. A vacation in Wisconsin wouldn't be complete unless we stopped to try our luck with rod and reel at one of the state's 8,000 lakes. This is White Birch Lake near the town of Boulder Junction. The fishermen are Pat Wilsey and his son Bruce, and they're after muskellunge, one of the most unpredictable game fish in the state. This one's a beauty, a 26-pound muskie. The Craft Mart near the town of Sister Bay in northeastern Wisconsin takes us back to the days when material for suits, dresses, and rugs was woven by hand. Using a large wooden loom, Gertrude Mayer carefully weaves fabrics with patterns and colors that will delight the eyes of anyone who admires luxurious cloth. Yes, folks, step right up. The show is about to begin, and we couldn't find a better place than the Circus World Museum in the little town of Baraboo, Wisconsin. All the wonderful sights, sounds, and smells that have enticed people into the special world of the circus for centuries past can be enjoyed here in one afternoon. And one of the greatest sounds of all is the music of a real old-time steam calliope. Let's listen. isn't this a magnificent circus wagon? All told, there are 35 ornately decorated bandwagons, tableaus, and cage wagons, some of them dating back 80 years. And we don't have to get up at 5 in the morning in order to watch them load the circus trains. It happens every day at 10 a.m. and then again at 2 in the afternoon. With 15 acres devoted to circus life, the State Historical Society of Wisconsin has gathered together the world's largest collection of treasured wagons and memorabilia from tent shows of Europe and the United States. The beautifully painted France Bandwagon, built in 1919, and this wonderful old chain-driven Mack truck, a workhorse used by Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey in the 1920s. Now, although it's called a museum, life here at Circus World is far from static. Big Percheron draft horses still haul the rolling stock. And watch this troop of young, precocious, performing elephants. The trainers are Mary and John Harrio, and the show goes on twice a day, 7 days a week. And here's a cutie, a skipping elephant. The place again, Baraboo, Wisconsin. Now, can you possibly guess what this is all about? Well, near Hayward, the Chippewa Indians still harvest wild rice along the quiet shallows of the Namakagon River. They use the same primitive methods of their ancestors. A canoe is pulled slowly through the rice plants while the woman uses wooden sticks to knock the rice off the tall, slender stalks. The rice falls into the bottom of the canoe, and later the grain is put in the sun to be dried in a birch bark tray. The Indians we've just seen are only part of the attraction at Historyland, a recreation of life in early Wisconsin. You know, in these days of highly sophisticated power tools, it's interesting to go back to the time when a couple of lumberjacks would cut up a big tree using nothing more than a two-man ripsaw and an awful lot of muscle power. Another skill that was developed to a high degree in the lumber camps was the art of throwing an axe. Forest black deer demonstrates. A perfect bullseye. Log rolling or burling is a fast-moving, rough contest that requires great skill, some fancy footwork, and plenty of endurance. In the white shirt is Howard Sia, wearing red is Billy Hopinka. The logs used for the sport are numbered and range in size from 20 inches in diameter, number 1, down to 14 inches, number 4. And as the size of the logs diminishes, staying on becomes that much more difficult. Another sport developed in the old lumber camps was a rough and tumble affair, canoe jousting. Using a long pole with a boxing glove attached, the idea is to knock your opponent into the water and then keep him from overturning your own canoe. Well, anyway, that's the idea. In the dreamy Wisconsin Dells country, we're stopping at this log stockade called Fort Dells, a flashback to the days of the American frontier. We can take a ride on an authentic river packet boat, hop aboard a real stagecoach, or try our luck on a hanging bridge. There's also a miniature train ride, but hold on a minute, what's all the commotion about? Well, we might have known it. It's that no-good critter, Black Bart. He just never gives up. You know, in the last 6 years, Black Bart has held up the same train 2,880 times. And of course, he gets caught every time. And what's more, any youngster within running distance joins the posse and takes the rascal off to the local jail. The man in the background beating the tom-tom is Chief Edward Cloud of the Winnebago tribe. His 4 sons are performing the age-old eagle dance, a show of respect for the tribal chief, who, because of his bravery, is entitled to wear the feathers of a golden eagle. This, too, is at Fort Dells. In the upper dells of the Wisconsin River, these sturdy passenger boats take visitors on a scenic tour of some of the state's most beautiful waterways. Passing by such spots as the entrance to Witches Gulch, our boat moves along beneath eroded sandstone cliffs on the 12-mile trip. Then, silently and slowly, we enter a wooded glen with overhanging trees and just barely enough water for our boat to make the passage. At Stand Rock, we disembark for a bit of unexpected entertainment. A big German shepherd named Chief is being put through his paces. He's making the 12-foot jump from the 46-foot high pillar of stone to a ledge where his master waits. The Wisconsin Dells, an unforgettable trip through some of the most scenic waterways in America. This odd-looking contraption jouncing along through the woods is called a duck. And like its namesake, it operates on land or water, splashing into the Wisconsin River with a kind of wild abandon that often surprises some of its unsuspecting passengers. Once in the water, however, it glides along quite smoothly. When it encounters an obstacle, such as a sandbar, it simply crawls up and over and then proceeds on its way again, and no one's the worse for wear. These duck rides on the Wisconsin Dells take an hour and 10 minutes, and along the way, we can cruise on Lake Delton, following historic Indian trails, and then ford several creeks. It's a unique experience on land and water, and another reason for spending a fun-filled vacation in this big green state called Wisconsin, a land of deep woods and shimmering lakes, a place to retrace the paths of the American frontier, and you'll relish every moment you spend away in Wisconsin. Let's return to New Glarus for a minute, that charming village that's often been called the most unique Swiss settlement in America. As the gaily colored parade of Swiss flags goes by, we saw those earlier, we hear an unfamiliar sound in the distance. Well, these are those Swiss alpine horns. They were originated by shepherds in the Swiss Alps who carved each one out of a single piece of mountain pine. Listen. Next.